Hello and welcome to another edition of Power of the Pen. I'm so excited because I have a very special guest who is a recent bestseller with his latest book called An Entrepreneur's Guide to Freedom, 7 Steps to Live Beyond Limits. And that's none other than Mark Rampolla. Mark, how's it going?
Doing great, LaWanna. Thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed listening to some of your other interviews, and so I'm very honored to be here.
This is going to be great. It's going to be packed and tight, but we're going to get a lot unpackaged here.
Great.
So I want to tell the audience a little bit about you. Mark is an entrepreneur, a speaker, a coach, a mentor. He actually is the founder of ZICO Coconut Water. If those of you are familiar with that, I know I have a couple in my refrigerator. And you are also the founder of Ground Force Capital.
Correct.
And I want to just ask you, with your journey, your entrepreneurial journey, what was it at this time that made you say, I need to write this particular book? Because you challenge the notion of how we achieve and live a freedom-filled life. Most people think, I do all the work, I do all the grinding, and ultimately I reach freedom. But you turn that totally on its head, and you're like, no. Freedom's a foundation. So can you walk us through that?
Oh, sure. Great question, LaWanna. Oh, boy. So I think, there's a phrase I remember from years ago. Teachers usually teach what they need to learn. I think that's true of many writers as well. And so I wrote what I needed. And so this was an exploration for me, because what my experience was, I built ZICO over 9 years, and it was tough. It was a lot of work, a real grind. And I was in many ways a poster child of quote unquote success. I sold the business to Coca-Cola, made quite a bit of money, had a beautiful life ahead, so I thought. And as I looked back almost a decade later, I started to realize that I didn't feel successful, and I certainly didn't feel free. I was still struggling with racing for the next business, the next sale, the next investment, the next whatever. I was not really taking care of myself health-wise. I was frankly drinking quite a bit. My marriage, 20 plus years that I thought was going to go the distance, fell apart. And I started to look around and think, is this success? Is this what I had been working towards? When will I start to feel free? And so, as I work and have for many years with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I started to share my own story about realizing this sort of disconnect for what I thought was, work, have a great idea, work really hard, make a ton of money, and then you'll be free, right? And I started to share that with a lot of other entrepreneurs, and I'd hear back, oh, me too. I've struggled with this. I've worried about this. And I realized that none of them were talking about it. And so I went on my own journey. So I spent about 7 years diving deep into psychology, coaching, neuroscience, ancient spirituality, to sort of understand, what did I believe and where did I kind of miss certain maybe lessons, and wound up sort of developing my own methodology for what worked for me to sort of hack this process in a way. And I people talk about 3 things needed for success: mindset, skill set, and tool set. And the skill set and the tool sets are usually specific to your industry, right? Real estate or brokerage or media or beverage in my case. The mindset, it's as if, just have a great mindset, right? How? So I started to develop and learn tools and skills to develop that mindset. And what I became to see myself is starting with freedom first was sort of the end, the proverbial start with the end in mind. If that's what I wanted, let's start with that now. And what I started to realize is, as I built more freedom into my life and applied some of these tools and techniques, I just started to feel better. I started to feel more free, more open, more present. And I actually got better results at business at the same time. And so all of that work, I started applying it in my investment firm. I started to hear people say, "What are you doing? You're so different. What's happening?" And so I decided to formalize that in this book, but it was really my own writings, my own journaling, my own tools that I'd been using for about 7 years. And I decided, if this can be useful to one person, then I want to, it's worthy for me to, spend the time and effort to bring it out, because I learned so much from so many others. So if I can help even one, up and coming entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur that's struggling with this, I'm honored to do so. And that's where this began.
Power of the Pen with LaWanna Bradford, expanding the impact and influence of authors from around the world. If you want to change the world, pick up your pen and write, said Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Books are uniquely portable magic. Power of the Pen spotlights authors from around the world. Listen as authors share messages that educate, motivate, inspire, and entertain. Join us each Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern on e360tv.com.
And I like what you said. If you could just touch one life, and I'm always of the mindset that if you touch one life, you literally change the next generation, because you're shifting how that person shows up and interacts and even teaches, those who are coming behind them. So I think it's really brilliant. So many, Mark, think that there's no room for change. There's no room for innovation when we think about principles, business principles. It's like, let's do the same old thing. And you're so right. They say, work on your mindset. Well, what does that really mean, right?
I'll give you an example. There's an old adage in business I think most people have heard. There's no place for emotion in business. No place, right? Be rational, not emotional. I bought into that for a period of time until it worked for a while, until it didn't. But what I realized is what I did, and I've heard this, I've shared this story with a lot of people, and I hear the same thing. At some point in the early journey of ZICO, I was so scared. I was so angry and fearful, and that I was terrified if I really felt that I would fall apart and that the business would fail. And so I somewhat consciously, somewhat unconsciously, almost as if I clipped the connection between my brain and my body to stop feeling. Now, of course, I continued to show up. I was a present father, a present husband. I was still maybe one of the more emotionally aware, leaders of that I had worked with and around. But yet inside, I was disconnected from my emotions. And it worked for a while, but then I found that things started to fall apart. And I started to realize, wow, what our emotional system, and the science is there. In neuroscience, we understand now. Emotions are just there, right? They're just energy that moves through the body. There's nothing right or wrong about them. And the denial of them can cause real problems. And so neuroscience research has been very clear on the connection between, one example is it's called emotional resonance, the ability to align your goals with your emotion that are emotionally charged, and to understand where your emotions may be holding you back from alignment with those goals. That's neuroscience. It's state-of-the-art research, and yet entrepreneurs and business leaders are still operating out of this 19th century mindset: no emotions, no emotion. So I bring it in. I bring it into boardrooms. I bring it into investment committee meetings. My team, we talk about emotion. Not good or bad. They're just there, right? And then we see, is there any data to learn from this? We don't base our decisions solely on that, like we don't base it on solely any data point, right? But to ignore this instinct that's been cultivated for hundreds of thousands of years in the human species is ridiculous. It's a data set. Why get so caught up in it? So that's one example.
Yeah, and I like what you said. When we think about our emotions and why they exist to serve us. I mean, this is how we experience the world. It's through these emotional indicators they show up in the body, and then they trigger a mental response, right?
Exactly. One simple example, fear, right? When we are looking at an investment, and we're an institutional grade investment firm, we write $20-30 million checks in the companies. We do, we'll work on due diligence for 3 months. We'll have what we call a memo, 100-page presentation, details and numbers and analysis and this and that. But before we make a final decision or anywhere along the way, we check in as a team. And any one of us might ask, hey, is there any unsaid emotions around this? And we check in, and someone might say, I'm looking at all the data. It all makes sense, but I just have this fear that X, right? So we hear that and say, okay, let's all look at that. What could that be telling us? Could that be telling us to dig deeper? Could that be telling us to get more data? Doesn't mean we abide by that alone, but why not be open to that, right? And we have found it's been really helpful to just probe a little bit deeper. And sometimes somebody's got some instinct that's just like, I don't know, something's off for me. It could be the opposite, where somebody says, look, the data is not showing it, but I'm telling you, there's something here. Let's keep digging. And very often we found some of our best investments or avoided investments or made investments based on that intelligence, validated with other work as well. But it's like anything else. It's a data set that's I want to, it's fascinating to me that great leaders talk about data, and then they ignore this as if there's nothing. We have no intuition, no connection, no ability. You get 7-8 brilliant people around that know an industry and are doing this work. There's information there. Let's get all of it.
Yeah, I agree. I want to ask you, so with all the changes that are going on here in the US and just around the world, there's a lot of, because you brought up fear, there's a lot of fear. Yeah. And so people, I feel that they fall in 3 buckets. They're either petrified, they're not moving, right? They feel it, but they're not doing anything, right. Or they bury their heads in the sand. They just don't want to deal with it. It's denial. Or they run around frenetically.
Right.
And,
right.
I call it the CLS, Chicken Little Syndrome.
Yes.
So
yes.
With your book and in your principles, how can we take change, which is, we know is always constant.
Yeah.
How do we take, especially the I guess, the tsunamic level of change that we're experiencing at this time? How do you take that, tap into your data, that of your team, and be able to separate to make those critical decisions? Because the right decisions, like you said, individuals may say, I don't feel right about this. You explore it and see, where does it take me? Is it, lead to a dead end, or does it open up to, now I see what you felt, right? Yes. I now have the data to validate the feelings.
Great question. Great question.
Okay.
From my sense, yes, these times are unbelievably complicated. We've always lived in complicated times, but I have a lot of compassion for any leader trying to navigate this. And the first place I start with the leaders that I work with, that we work with, is first of all, some compassion and some acknowledgement, because it is lonely at the top. And many of these leaders are trying to make these really important decisions alone, and they feel like they have to get it right. So one of the things I start with is just the acknowledgement, like, hey, what's going on for you, right? And so there's a couple little tools that we use. One is separating fact from story. So looking at this fact pattern, right? Okay, I'll give you a specific example. Tariffs, right? Okay, this business is in a category, tariffs are up, they're uncertain, Okay, so here's the fact pattern. We can identify all the facts. What is the story you're telling yourself? We are always telling ourselves a story. It's what the mind does. Most people are not even aware of it. When you can step back and just create a little bit of distance and say, yeah, interesting. I'm telling myself a story that these tariffs are terrible. They're going to complicate my business, that we're going to run out of money, that we're not going to, Okay, great. Write that down. write down the story. So you see some facts, and then here's the story. And then ask yourself, am I certain? Am I certain that these tariffs are bad? They're going to destroy my business. Okay. 100% certain, right? Can you guarantee it? And I think any rational person says, yeah, probably not. And just creating that little bit of space opens one up to possibility. And then I use another little tool in the book that's, how could the opposite be true? How could it be that these times are the best thing that's ever happened for you in your business? Is it possible? Could you just, and a lot of people are like, no, it's terrible. It's terrible. Are you certain, right? And creating that ability to create a little space. And I have seen entrepreneurs, leaders, people in the most complicated situations find ways through, find ways to create unbelievable value, unbelievable joy and happiness in their life or success in their businesses by doing that. And there's a second technique. It's very clearly identifying the difference between what you can control, what you cannot control, but what you can influence. And when you can identify those, write them down and come back to them. You can't control what presidents do, what countries do, you complain about it with your friends or whatever you want, but you can't control it, right? At all. You can't even influence it. What you can control is how you show up for your team. You control, are you sleeping? Are you taking care of yourself? How much consumption of media are you taking in? How are you keeping yourself clean and allowing to show up for your team? Because you don't think your team's going through the same thing. And when they see you frenetic, what's likely to happen? And then what can you influence? You can influence your team, right? Are you checking in with them even more frequently? Are you creating space to feel them, hear them, let them feel heard and seen, and they get back to the business at hand, right? So I talked through some very specific techniques. I was working on this book over a number of years, so our time has gotten even more complicated. But I find it to be absolutely applicable in this time, if not more so. The more complicated this is on the outer world, the more I encourage people do the inner work. That's ultimately what this book is about. The inner work leads to outer results, both business and personal. And that inner work is ultimately about personal freedom.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm certain you're familiar with John Assaraf, and that's his whole thing is about, the inner size, right? Just like we take care of our body, we got to go deep. We have to be willing to peel back the onion, right?
F. Scott Fitzgerald stated, "Don't write because you want to say something. Write because you have something to say." There are thousands of people waiting to read your book and hear your message. Be a guest on the Power of the Pen TV series. To complete your application and schedule your interview, call 404-618-2824 today. The world is waiting for you.
In our day and age, I live in California. Everybody talks about they've got their surgeon or their doctor or their trainer or their whatever. Nobody wants to talk about, a coach, a therapist, mental health. We talk about it as if it's shifting. It's really not. The data is scary. I'm forgetting the exact number. I think it's 78% of entrepreneurs will experience a mental health crisis at some point in their journey as an entrepreneur. 78%. I think it's closer to 80%. Yeah. 2 to 4 times higher than the average population. 2 to 4 times higher.
It actually mirrors those in the corporate side. So 80% are very dissatisfied. And so they have this emotional detachment, right? I just need to just get through the day. But if they have their choice and if they have the courage, they would do something different.
And look, I appreciate you sharing that, LaWanna. I was not aware of that fact, and that is a very interesting parallel. What I'll say is I know that one in me. I can look back and say in my corporate career, I had that. And I'll even own many of the ZICO years, over 9 years, successful entrepreneur, well-educated, well-trained. I had a lot of days that I was just getting through, right? A lot of weeks, a lot of months. And so I have compassion for anyone that's in that situation. What I will tell you is, and this is one of the things one of the reasons I wrote this book is, one of the other catchphrases I use is, take 100% responsibility for the situation of your life. And so when you can, it's very easy to shame and blame, including ourselves. Oh, had I done this differently? Why did I start this business? Love, compassion, and take 100% responsibility. And so what I've seen is a shift in myself, even after selling ZICO, running this investment firm. I can look back on a lot of days where I'm like, I just got to get through. Now I see that, I can see it coming. I've developed the technique and the tools and the skills to say, there it goes again. What's going on for me? How can I shift my energy? I have some other tools in the book around taking responsibility and then owning your energy and making little shifts. Do I have to be in this meeting? How can I have more energy up? Whose energy up for me? And all of a sudden, I believe we can take responsibility and shift our lives without changing our jobs. But maybe that leads to a major change in our life as well.
Oh, I totally agree. I want to read this quote. Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, said, "Most business books teach you how to win. This teaches you how to live while you build, lead, and grow. It is both a wake-up call and a lifeline to entrepreneurs."
Oh, God, I love Sarah for that. Sarah's been a friend for many, many years, obviously an extraordinarily successful entrepreneur. And look, we've had heart-to-heart conversations over the years, Sarah and I, about just the reality of life and business and blending and family. And God, as a female leader, I know she had a lot of challenges being the, young woman in the room and what that all meant to her. And so I really appreciate her sharing that. That was my goal, because I think one of the things I came to realize as well is it's as if we separate, business and life. It doesn't. It's just life. And so, and getting really practical, when we look across our investment portfolio, the leaders that really scale and win are the ones that do the inner work. They know themselves. They're self-aware. They can ask questions. They're open to be challenged. They can ask the question. They start from curiosity. These are all messages and tools that I share in the book, because that's the things that lead one to, first of all, take care of oneself, know oneself, love oneself, stay in your zone of genius, not trying to be everything that everybody else says you should be. And that is both, I believe, key to a successful, fulfilling life and great business results. So I love that quote from Sarah as well.
I agree with what you just said. And in fact, it was one of my little bullets here. You said, know, own, and celebrate yourself. And that's all part of self-acceptance. And, it's interesting. I think men, and you can correct me if you disagree, I think men do a better job in that than women. We tend to play small. Right.
Yeah.
We don't want to elevate. We'll elevate someone else, but I don't want to talk about my wins. Whereas the guys will talk about that winning championship game from 40 years ago. You guys won't let it go.
Look, that's so interesting, LaWanna. This could be we could spend hours on this alone. I'll share my experience is that I think you're right. I know you're right, right? I see it all the time, right? What I will tell you is underneath that outer arrogance, in many ways, confidence is often insecurity and fear. And I will tell you, both men and women, I work with a ton of both. We're more women than men in my investment firm, for example. Everybody beats up on themselves. And so what I think happens is you may think men are, they're so confident, but they're beating up on themselves. They're their worst critics, for sure. Women do both. They don't celebrate outwardly, but man, do they beat themselves up. And so one of the things that I encourage is that exactly what you said, know, own, and celebrate yourself. Because what I learned years ago when I worked for a corporation, I was following the playbook on, it was called a performance development roadmap, how to help everybody, sort of grow in their career and life. And I look back and realized, oh, we were trying to create everyone to be, a Bill Gates or a Jesus Christ, right? Like you got to be this kind, but yet tough. You got to be creative, yet data driven to be a manager. And I realized it's garbage. It's impossible. The best organizations and the best leaders play to their strengths. They know them. Yeah, look, and the reality is when you do that, you get more energy and better results, but you also create space for another to shine because it's a given. Whatever you're not great at, there's someone in the world that wakes up in the morning excited about that. Could be finance, could be selling, could be whatever it is. And so this is where I get jazzed, is helping leaders and organizations figure out how to combine and create an environment where everybody has the opportunity to, frankly, achieve their maximum self-realization, along the way, delivering amazing business results. And that is so amazing to see what can happen when people finally accept it. Yeah, you know what? Look, I'm just so you know me, I love hearing this from, for example, leader. Look, here's my blind spots. Here's my weaknesses. That's why I have Mary or Joe or somebody to fill this gap for me because I know myself.
Yeah. And that's one of, you have all of these personality tests, but I love the Gallup Strength Finders.
Oh, one of my favorites.
Isn't that brilliant?
Brilliant. It's amazing.
Yes.
We use that. In fact, when we hire someone on our team, when we before we make an investment in a company, we'll typically do a Strengths Finder deep interview, also either and or Myers-Briggs and Enneagram, and then we'll also very often do, particularly with a CEO or founder CEO, something called the what's this other tool? I'm blanking on it right now, but a very deep psychological assessment. And it's not about good or bad. It's about them knowing themselves, us knowing them, and then having an open, healthy conversation. We, for example, use Enneagram in our firm. Everybody knows each other. We talk about it openly because it just helps lighten the conversation, have a little bit more fun with it. And there I go, being a 7. Right? Yeah, I'm going to be enthusiastic. I'm going to be energetic. I'm going to be positive, right? And thankfully, we have others on the team that, in fact, we've hired to fill others on the team that complement, those of us that are already here.
I love this. Mark, can you believe we are almost at the end of our time?
No, I can't. Wow.
What I like to do is I just want to take myself down and give you a few minutes to give some closing words to our listening audience, let them know how they can find your book and also connect with you, because I believe you have a new community that
I've had such a great response from the book. So the book's available on Amazon.com, An Entrepreneur's Guide to Freedom. And I have a website just set up, markrampolla.co, which is, we just had such a positive response on the book. I'm beginning to create a private community that will allow mainly entrepreneurs, but also other leaders to share, to learn. I'll be sharing some kind of behind the scenes things that I'm learning and experience with myself and the companies I support. And then, create a community where everybody does this work, get to know themselves better, get to accept themselves, learn some of these tools, share some of the learning, all with the objective of building freedom more into, everything we do. And then on the investment side, part of our hope is that, some of these companies will, get great results from this work and get to a phase where Ground Force Capital might be interested. So that's groundforcecapital.com. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn, but not really any other social media.
Thank you so very much, Mark. I so appreciate you taking the time to grace, power of the pen, with your presence, with your brilliance. I encourage everyone, get this book. I think right now it's all about innovating, right? And reimagining what you can be and what life can be and your business can be. So
reimagine, rethink, recharge, that, and it's a long, beautiful life, and you are where you are. And I try this. I think it meets people where they are, wherever they are in their journey.
I love it. Well, thank you again. Thank you so very much, Mark, and to our listening audience. Thank you for joining us for another edition of Power of the Pen. We look forward to seeing you next week. And just remember that in life and in business, when your vision intersects with opportunity, success is inevitable. Be safe, be well. Bye, Mark.
Bye, LaWanna. Thank you.